Thanks. So, FASD and sleep. So, we know this is a big question. I'll just start though by acknowledging that all the traditional owners of the various lands on which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. FASD and sleep is obviously a big deal. We know sleep affects quality of life. And I wonder how many of you have a child who has trouble falling asleep, wakes up in the night, or has trouble going back to sleep, or gets up too early. Feel free to put a comment in the chat if this is something that you experience. But we know that sleep difficulties for these children can really affect the whole family in quite a long-term way. We also know that sleep affects behaviour. There's a lot of evidence that there's an association between, particularly for children with FASD, when they have sleep difficulties, we see more emotional problems, more behavioural difficulties, more aggression and disruptive behaviour, more difficulty focusing and sleepiness. But not all children will show their tiredness as sleepiness. Some of them will show it as behavioural dysregulation. And we know that this is really challenging for carers. This was a study of parents who were caring for a child with FASD, and they just described, feeling like a zombie, not having time to recover at all from this disrupted sleep, a bit like having a small baby sometimes. And then you're expected to manage quite difficult behaviour after very little sleep. And this is a major reason that people got asked for respite. It did contribute to some placements breaking down, and it sort of reduced the ability of carers to cope with some situations. So we can't underestimate the importance of sleep. And what researchers have found is that, somewhere between, over half to nearly all children with FASD will have some difficulties with sleep. So 65% of families report at least one sleep problem, mostly difficulty falling asleep, followed by difficulty staying asleep, and then waking up early in the morning. This is an Australian study as well. And I think a third of children had all three of those difficulties. So a typical child might sleep an average of 8 hours a night, and of the time they're in bed, they're going to sleep about 80% of the time. But a child with FASD is their average sleep is at least an hour shorter. They sleep much less of the time that they're in bed. That's what we call sleep efficient. Oh no, is that the sleep efficiency? Anyway, they are much more often awake in bed than neurotypical kids. And they spend more time in light sleep than in deep sleep. So they don't get as much REM sleep, the dreaming sleep, and they don't get that deep restorative sleep. And both deep sleep and REM sleep play a role in, the brain and body processing the events of the day, processing information, creating memories. They really do have a significant effect. So why can sleep be difficult? There are a lot of reasons. I'm not going to read all of these out. I will give you this handout, but the thing with children with FASD is that some of the brain differences affect their ability to manage their arousal. That's how alert they are. The sort of children with hyperactivity often don't sleep because their mind is racing, and it's not a behavior they can necessarily control. Then you've got your sensory factors. So, can't get comfortable, the clothes aren't right, the bedding's not right, it's too hot, too cold. We've got medical factors sometimes, not being able to breathe properly or snoring or getting up to go to the toilet a lot or just not feeling well. Then there's the sort of environmental factors, what's going on around you, stimulation before bed or the bedtime routine or not, the noise in the house. Going around. Then there's family factors. Sometimes there's things going on in the family that make it hard for children to sleep. There's things that might be on their mind, or the family schedule can contribute to this. Anxiety, worries, fears, and things that might be going on for them, sleep anxiety, worrying about falling asleep, things like that can contribute. And then you've got circadian rhythm. So this is, the way the body responds to light and dark, in our natural environment. The time of day affects the hormones in our body, the cortisol in our body, our state of alertness, and we naturally start to get sleepier as it gets a bit darker. And that's a sort of typical. Now, we have a lot of variations. Some people are night owls, some people get up early. So there's a lot of natural variations. But for children with FASD, this circadian rhythm, this natural sense of getting tired when it gets dark is not necessarily working the way it might in typical children. The sleep architecture is the sort of the part of the brain that puts us into that deep sleep and keeps us in deep sleep. And this is disrupted for children with FASD very often. And so they literally can't stay asleep as long as other children. And they don't get the deep sleep that you might get otherwise. And it's not behavioral, and it's not necessarily about what happened in the day or the bedding or any of those things. It's literally how their brain sleeps. And any of you who've had a bit of insomnia will know, it doesn't always, if you have a bit of insomnia, it doesn't matter what you do beforehand, you're not going to sleep very well. And, we sleep less as we get older, and you just have to kind of accept it. It's your body. It's not necessarily anything that you're doing. You can't necessarily get back to the good old days when you used to sleep through the night quite easily. And I won't tell you about sleep hygiene because I reckon just about everyone here has heard about sleep hygiene. Put your hand up if you haven't, but you've probably had multiple people. If you've got a child who's got sleep difficulties, I can guarantee someone will have said to you, have you got a good bedtime routine? Do you turn the screens off before bed? Don't let them drink Diet Coke in the middle of the night. All of these things are probably very familiar to you. These are the standard things that we do to get good sleep. They're the things that are easier to control sometimes. Go to bed at the same time every night. Well, it's hard if you have a child that isn't cooperating with the bedtime and they're not getting into bed at the time that you've asked them to, or there's lots of reasons why this can be challenging to achieve. But it still remains the foundation of good sleep is get as good sleep hygiene as you can. We obviously want to avoid doing the things that are known factors that make kids not sleep so well. But if it was that easy, you'd all be doing it, right? So it is important to match the strategy to one of the reasons. We talked about there's a multitude of reasons, and you can go back and have a look at those. But if it's a body clock issue, you just don't feel ready, it does help to have a really regular bedtime, for example. Or if it comes out of anxiety, you might be looking at the calm routines, meditation, whatever you might do, massage sometimes helps kids. If it's sensory, you want to check the sensory things that could be going on. Can we make it darker? Can we fix the bedding so the child doesn't get too hot in the night? If the child's overstimulated, we want to have quieter activities before bed. Maybe there's something like a bath will help them soothe. But all kids and young people are different. And so we need to be tuning in to, some kids will have a shower and that'll make them very relaxed, and other kids will have a shower and they'll be bouncing off the walls. So one size doesn't always fit all. And sometimes it's about medication, which is something we encourage people to talk to their doctor, GP, pediatrician about. So in general, the principles are, to get the bedtime routine working, but you want to match the strategy to the possible reasons for this child not having difficulty getting into bed. But again, it's not quite that simple. There's a lot of limitations for these sleep strategies when we're talking about children with FASD. So that biological basis for poor sleep, with the sleep architecture of the brain being a bit disrupted, and sometimes even when they get sleep, they don't wake up feeling rested. Kids with FASD can have a lot of trouble stopping doing that preferred activity before bed and transitioning into the bedtime routine, which can make it harder to implement those routines. Or you can have a really good bedtime routine and then one day the child just gets sick of it and says, I'm not cooperating anymore. Kids with FASD routinely lose interest in strategies that were previously working because they just don't want to do it anymore. And sometimes when we try to reinforce that bedtime routine, it can lead to increased arousal, like they're more activated, and it can lead to conflict before bed, which obviously isn't going to make anyone sleep very well. And another factor I think is that kids with FASD can often get stuck thinking about something. So they might get a bit, we call it perseveration, when they can't get their mind off something. So they might be worried about something, or they might want something. They might be obsessed about when it is their birthday or what they want for Christmas, and they get up in the night and tell you about it 4 or 5 times. So that actual brain process of getting really stuck on things is a big contributor. Some of the strategies that can help kids with FASD, general sort of strategies. Keeping the same bedtime in the holidays is important because the routine does help kids, but they don't adapt very well to changes in routine. Whereas one child might take, a couple of days after the holidays to get back into the school sleep routine, kids with FASD will take much longer. And so it can really help to limit the amount of changes, and I've talked with carers who've said we have to go to bed at the same time every day, no matter where we are or what we're doing. Um, you know, Keeping the room dark can help some kids, but other kids really want a nightlight. So that's very individual, but it is about doing a bit of investigation yourself. And I'm sure that, if you've had a child not sleeping, you've probably done a lot of this. Things like audiobooks, white noise, music, or meditation tapes, or, CDs, music, whatever. This can be good, particularly if you can put it on a timer, or you can control it from outside the room on a Bluetooth speaker, for example. So it's not a device that a child's necessarily got in their room, but something that you can set up with them. And again, speaking to your doctor about medications are important. There's no magic fix, though. It really is about just persisting with strategies in a kind of gentle way and testing out. And I'm sure that you've probably tried many of these things yourselves. Some of the suggestions, I've talked to carers who say, look, audiobooks are expensive. It's good to know you can get them for nothing from your local library. If you join your library, and you can then download apps like BorrowBox or Libby, and then you can borrow a certain number of free audiobooks at any time. So that's a cheap strategy. I've known some carers who found that their children were maybe responsive to these sort of toys. So these are like low stimulation toys. The Meditate Monkey plays a guided meditation, and then music, and it sort of turns off after so many minutes. The whale plays whale noises, and the koala does sort of breathing with a little nightlight in its stomach. Now, you might have a child who loves this kind of thing, or you might have a child that overstimulates them. So there's no one fix, but these are the kind of things that, it's a way to introduce something that meets some of those needs, whether it's for sensory or for stimulation or relaxation. Stacey's bought a weighted teddy. Will be interesting to hear. Yeah, I was going to weighted little animals can be a really good thing, but like anything, it's sort of try it and see. Try it with your child, give it a go. I think the thing I often say with kids with FASD is if it doesn't work, don't throw it out. Come back to it in a week or a month or 6 months, because sometimes cycling through strategies is actually our strategy. There's not going to be one magic thing that they go off to bed for the next year with. But maybe, the novelty of it again in a few months might get you, even if it's a couple of nights better sleep. Now, if any of you are a bit technical, or if you're not technical, maybe there's someone in the family who is. The good thing about these smart light globes is if you've got a bit of know-how, you can set them up with this sunset routine. So these are the sort of light globes. You can get them at the shops now. Coles, Woolies sell all of these. And there's YouTube. This top picture, is a YouTube video. Oh, go back. This is a YouTube video of how to use them. So this is using a Philips smart home light. And what you can do is, I won't explain all the steps, but if you are someone who is into technology, or someone in the family can help you, you can set these globes up. So even in the lounge room, you can have it gradually turn into an orange light as it gets a bit closer to sunset, for example. And then you can have the lights naturally dim. Now, you might do this in one room or the child's room, But you could set it that if the child wakes up in the night, their lamp has, a deep red color rather than a bright yellow color, and that could help with that arousal. So being able to replicate, more natural lighting, because they might need a bright light to read at night when they're going to bed. But then if you can make that light more yellow and then more orange in the night, it's going to help them stay asleep. So the red and orange hues tend to help us sleep. The blue light tends to wake us up, or white light. That's again circadian rhythm stuff. If you're looking after young people, though, we know it can be very hard to get them off devices at night. And sometimes, that might be something they use to help them regulate, or especially when young people are spending a lot of time awake at night because they really can't sleep, they need something to do. They might be connecting with friends, not really something you want them to do in the middle of the night, obviously. And but managing boredom can be a big factor, or just, helping them tune out a bit. And sometimes it's just a habit, but it can be very hard to interrupt. So I think that the sleep hygiene principle of, no devices for 2 hours before bed and no devices in the bedroom is a really good one. If you are doing that, I wouldn't be introducing them. But if you have a young person who says, I'm doing this regardless and you can fight me to get this device off me, I guess what I'm saying is families do what they need to do to cope. And sometimes I've known families where this is how the carers slept. And I would never judge anyone for doing that. I think we have to, carers need to make decisions to survive. And I was talking to one carer one day, and they were actively working to get this kid off a device. And then the carer bought him a new iPad, and they said, oh, maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. And then what I thought about is this carer really needs a break. So unconsciously, they're getting the thing for the child that is going to give them a little bit of relief, a little bit of respite. And that's natural. So I think it can be hard to have a blanket no devices, but children and young people with FASD really need a lot of supervision. So there's a difference between having a device and having access to the internet. Those are two different things. And I would never recommend a kid having unsupervised access to online stuff, particularly at night. That's really increases their risk. So what can help is, if possible, this is sort of idealistic, maybe having a realistic plan of what they can and can't have, working down to reduce the amount of stimulation rather than expecting them to, immediately turn everything off. Getting someone, and again, you need to be a little bit technical, but maybe there's someone in your family who can help, dimming the light, turning the volume down, turning notifications off, or having some restricted apps. Finding something that is quieter but kind of meets the same needs. So a book is a great idea, a book and a torch maybe, or a book and a lamp that's on a timer. External cues like this is sort of more for the getting ready for bed stuff. But sorry, some of these are from the other slide. Either in bit about instructions is from the other slide, so apologies for that. I shall edit that up. But basically, a couple of suggestions. For example, if you've got a kid that is really bored at night and they're up for a couple of hours, something like an Amazon speaker, this is a second-hand one, where you can say, Alexa, play music, and you can set a timer on it, and you can set that timer from the other room. Might be a better option than a device with a light on it, for example. Or if the young person is waking up the family, headphones that you can, control, or at least control the volume of, do you know what I mean? So none of these are perfect sort of answers, but they are things that you could explore to sort of get somewhere closer to what you would like your child's bedtime to be like. And I'll be interested to hear what your suggestions are. When kids are waking early or waking up a lot through the night, these again, probably some obvious things. We want to keep the lighting dim, minimal verbal interaction, just having the same response every time, back to bed, giving them one or two sort of quiet activities to do in the room. Again, please post any of your suggestions in the chat. We don't want them doing anything unsafe or anything stimulating. You know, you wouldn't introduce something like a device. But you also need to have a bit of a plan to kind of protect other family members' sleep as well. And some children benefit from a sort of the morning starts cue rather than expecting them to know when it's time to get up. So that can involve, you know, digital clocks, depending if they can read them. I knew one carer once who'd done this whole sort of daytime cycle on the wall that said, you know, 2 o'clock still asleep, 3 o'clock still asleep, 4 o'clock still nighttime, 5 o'clock, you know, 7 o'clock start getting up. And the child was able to read the digital clock and look down the list. And that really worked for them because they could redirect them to say it wasn't about, no, it's not time to get up. It was, no, let's look at the chart. It's still nighttime. Other sort of sleep difficulties, when you get things like nightmares or sleep talking or unusual behavior in the night or snoring, when you're worried about their breathing or they're sweaty or restless, this is stuff you really want to be taking to your GP or pediatrician and maybe getting a sleep study. Now, one of the challenges is, you know, they always want you to track the sleep. Pediatricians and GPs can give you a lot of support around assessing sleep, especially breathing difficulties. They can prescribe melatonin or other medications, and they can help get referrals to specialist clinics. Tracking sleep can be really important. I mean, they do it when you do a sleep study, but if you're going back to your doctor saying, look, I think he's getting less sleep than he was, or this is happening or that's happening, often what the doctors will hear is they're not getting much sleep. And they'll say, what are the details? And sometimes you're too tired to remember. Now, tracking, the more you track, even if it's a short period of time, the better, because you can go to the doctor and go, well, look, I can see he's waking up at least half an hour earlier every day on this new medication. That's really good information. That's really concrete. But you might not have the energy to fill this in every day. So I've got a suggestion, which is to use a voice note thing on your phone if you have one, or an iPad. Every device will have a voice recorder on it. And you can use that and just dictate a quick note to yourself. You could even have an alarm every day at, you know, 7:30 in the morning or whatever it is, to just say, describe last night's sleep. And you could just say a couple of sentences into your phone. You don't even have to do anything with it then. It will just be stored with the date. And then you can, you know, if you're good at technology, you can export these into Word, or if you're not, you give it to your worker or someone and say, help me get these off my phone. I don't know how to do it. But this for me is a good suggestion in that it's the least demanding way, I think, to record a sleep diary just by talking into it. And you can just say, you know, went to bed at 10, got up about 4 times, got up at 6, and the whole family had to get up then. Bang, you're done. A lot easier than filling in a diary. Another option I found online, there's sleep trackers that are watches and things, but I think a lot of kids are not going to want to wear something. But this is one that you can put under the mattress or under the mattress protector. So there, if you look up non-wearable sleep trackers, what this could do is give you some data to take to your doctor to show the pattern that you're dealing with. That is less demanding. You don't have to keep a diary yourself. It's all recorded. I mean, it's $200. So I'm not saying go out and get one. This was just one that I found online, but it might be, you know, there might be other things a bit like this. Sorry. Allied health providers can be really important because they can help you work out, you know, which are the best wind down activities. You might know that yourself, but sometimes it can help to talk to someone. They can help you test out different sensory strategies. They can help you do visuals if that's going to help. They can help you work on behavioural strategies to manage wakefulness, because sometimes you might be working with an OT or someone who's saying, well, how can we get the child to sleep more? But if you flip it a bit and go, how can we get the child to manage being awake and not disrupt the family? That sets you a whole other goal that that provider can help you work towards. Allied health providers can also be good advocates for carers, because sometimes others will be going, well, are you really doing the bedtime routine? Are you really doing the sleep hygiene? Because I don't know why it's not working. And they can be telling other people, you know what, FASD is different, and you're expecting results that you're not going to get. They can give evidence of the impact of sleep on family life difficulties. I talked to one carer once and they really wanted a medication review, and the doctor kept saying, I can't review the medication until you fill in the sleep diary. So we got the worker to help do the sleep diary because it just wasn't going to happen otherwise. Sorry. Gone backwards. And carers. Well, I think the first thing is just to recognize there may be factors that are not going to respond to typical sleep strategies, and sometimes we have to accept that. Um, Encourage your professionals to read up about FASD and sleep because it is different. It is different to other sleep problems. You can work with the allied health providers to at least try some different strategies. It might take them a while to see that this is not going to work for your kid, but then once they've figured that out, they might be able to help you with the next thing. Reducing expectations of kids when they do wake up tired. Like just sometimes they need to not go to school because it could be the day that they get kicked out of school because they're just so tired they can't regulate. It's a real body thing. And talk to your GP, pediatrician, and also talk to other carers and get support from No FASD and from PCAF. And you could probably have a whole carer meeting where people share sleep strategies. So we've got an evaluation, and I'll get Deb to also post the link in the chat, and we'll send this out afterwards as well. But we'd love it if you want to scan this with your phone, but don't fill it in yet because we're just going to have a little bit of a chat.